Partnership for Public Service, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. We've been around since 2001. And our mission really is to build a better government and a stronger democracy, as Anne mentioned a little bit earlier. We are not the federal government. That's a common misconception, but we are like the federal government's best friend. We work with them a lot, and we just understand a lot about that ecosystem, so that is why we're here today. And then our Public Service Network team, as I mentioned earlier, we collaborate with government agencies, but also higher education and higher ed organizations, just teaching students more about public service and encouraging them to become public servants. All right, so a little bit more about our gogovernment.org website. Raise your hand if you've been on it before. All right, seeing some hands, great. All right, so you'll know what I'm talking about. So gogovernment.org, that QR code is live if you want to add that to your phone. But that website is our team's website, the Public Service Network team's website. We are actually revamping it. So come August, September of this year, you're going to see a lot more information on federal, state, and local hiring with a microsite on the state of California. But it's really the repository of all things federal hiring. So if you want to know about the background check process, what type of pay you might get as a federal employee, anything else pertaining to benefits, that is where you should go. But with our website refresh coming soon, just taking a moment to talk about what we're going to include. So of course, over the last couple of years, there have been some changes to the federal hiring process, so we're going to have a lot more information there. Expanded federal career guides. So I'm going to talk about career guides in a moment, but we are increasing our career guide number just based on sector and major from 16 to 19 career guides. We're going to have some new state government career guides as well. We haven't had those before. And then a new state of California hub featuring career guides and early career resources. So if you're originally from California or interested in working for the state of California, we'll have that there. That is our first state government test case with a view to eventually add a couple more states. A public service internship finder. I'm going to talk about our federal internship finder in a moment, but we are actually going to expand that finder to include federal and state and local opportunities. All right, our Go Government career guides. So again, if you don't really know what you want to do in federal government, this is a great place to start. So we currently have 16. Those are the ones that are currently on the website. But again, that number is going to expand and be a little bit more refined come fall. But if you want to know what type of job opportunities there are, we have a live ticker attached to USAID jobs, so you can see what that might entail. But let's say you're an econ major, you can click on that business and finance career guide and see what agencies could I work at, what would the pay be, and what agencies typically hire economists. So that is a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more. And then our federal internship finder. So like I mentioned before, we are going to actually expand this to include state and local government come fall, but right now this is a repository of all evergreen internships, fellowships, postdoc opportunities available in the federal government. So this is not a live jobs board, but what you can do is use all of those filters that you see at the bottom of the slide and see what type of internship, fellowship, other opportunities might be available to you in the federal government, and use it as a planning tool. And then that QR code on the right, that is live, so if you want to add that to your phone, feel free. And then very quickly, our Go Government newsletter. So if you want to stay updated, especially with this website refresh, if you want job opportunities sent to you once a month into your inbox, state and local and events, feel free to just sign up at that QR code there. You can also access these slides later through your recording. All right, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jessie for a policy update, just giving you an update on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessie Durrett. I'm a director, as you mentioned, on the policy team. You have my whole bio, but I've worked in the federal government as well, and I've been in your shoes of being interested in public service and not knowing how to navigate it. So what I work on the policy team is forward-looking reform issues about how to reform and make federal government better, but we also track a variety of updates that are changing the landscape for people like yourselves, and we want to provide some information, especially since obviously in this moment there's a lot of change, but early career talent and your policy pathways are still important. Okay, so there's been a lot of change in the last 18 months, so we just want to talk about some of that. So in 2025, there was obviously a lot of news about cuts in the federal government. Reduction in force, RIF, is what layoffs in the federal government are called. They're called that because it's tied to a specific process that has like a bunch of rules to it. And so in 2025, as you may have seen in the news, there were some cuts across the government and incentives for people to leave. But for the most part, that wave has ended, is what we've seen, and there has been a focus on hiring in the federal government again. So we want to kind of lay out where we see some particular opportunities. I know many of you are interested in social sciences, public policy issues more generally, and some of these areas may not be immediately exciting to you, but there are hiring in other areas, and also the way these are defined are relatively broad, so just keep an open mind. So where we're seeing the biggest opportunities are IT, tech, AI, and we'll go into the tech force and cyber core a bit more. Project management analysis, that's across all areas of the federal government, so you could do project management related work at FEMA, EPA, DOD, etc. Human resources, there's always a shortage of human resources in the federal government, and human capital is really critical to deploying resources where they're needed in the federal government. Contracting, so people who are in work for the federal government but are overseeing contracts, so that could be contracts with NGOs, it could be contracts with the people who build aircraft carriers or nuclear reactors, it could be contracts in any kind of capacity. And then finance, so making sure that resources are well spent and accounted for in the federal government. You may have seen again in the news that there are hiring freezes still in place in parts of the federal government, but there are exemptions, so that's part of the reason that some of the resources that Stephanie laid out are really important, is that way you can kind of look at where people are hiring through USA Jobs, because jobs are still being posted across the federal government. So while you may hear about limitations, and there are certainly limitations, if you are interested, definitely keep digging, because that's not the end of the story. So in the last couple of years across administrations, there has been an increased focus on assessing skills as part of the application process, and not just kind of taking your word for it, like, I, Jessie Durrett, think I'm an expert in Europe, therefore take my word for it. And kind of doing various assessments to better assess people's skills and be able to kind of know whether they'll be able to bring that type of skill set to day one. So that's been a focus in Congress and in the administration. It's a bipartisan priority. In 2025, this administration put forward what's called the Merit Hiring Plan, which kind of goes into greater detail on how exactly they plan on assessing skills, as opposed to kind of taking people's word for it or other tactics that are less helpful for really assessing whether people can do that job. So there's been a variety of efforts that kind of varies across the skills, like what the job is though, so there isn't, the assessments people are using depend on whether it's an IT job or something else, but just so that you know. The Merit Hiring Plan also limits resume length to 2 pages. I'm not sure if you all have heard this, but in the past, federal resumes have often been over 20 pages. If you have heard that, put that back in your mind. That's not how things are being done anymore. So the limit is now on a 2-page resume. Adds new essay questions, some of which are tricky to answer, so if people have questions about that, we can answer them. And then it aims to speed up hiring processes across the board as well. So here, I'm going to go over some of the things that have existed for a long time and still exist, and then we're going to talk about a few things that are new in this administration and their focus on early career talent. And early career talent definitely includes you all, but also includes a bit older, so just keep that in mind that even if you don't do it this moment, some of those opportunities remain open to you. So pathways, internships, and recent graduate programs, semester of service, student volunteer programs. One of the things that's new in this administration is the Early Career Talent Network, which has its own website that you can check out, and the way that is set up is some of the priority areas that I mentioned in a previous slide. It kind of points people towards where their particular needs of of talent and where the openings are, and tries to make it a bit easier for people who are interested in federal government jobs, but don't necessarily want to have to apply to each individual job, so it's a good resource to check out. And then, I'm sure you all have heard of AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, and Fulbright. I flagged those, I know, because they do make it easier to get into the federal government later, if that's an interest to you, and I know some of those deadlines might feel like they've passed for you, or maybe some of you are doing those programs, but obviously you don't have to do them immediately after college, they remain open. And they can make it, for I believe for all three of those programs, if you then later apply for a federal government job, you're basically treated like an internal candidate. So it is like a pipeline of possibility. So these are some of the programs that this administration has particularly rolled out or at the top. So one of them is Tech Force. It's a 2-year program. It's kind of treated more like, instead of like a job where you're an individual, you show up day one, you're on board on your own. It's more of a cohort experience, and they are, there's like a relationship with the private sector too, so people get experience in both public and private sector experience by doing it. I wanted to list out, and you can read for yourself, all the areas of work, because people might think, well, I'm not a coder, that doesn't fit me. It is a little broader than that in how they interpret Tech Force, so if you have any interest at all, feel free to check it out. And then, like I noted, some of the programs that have existed in the past still exist. One of them is CyberCorps, which pairs education and opportunities in the federal government as well. Okay. I think that's it for now, and we can do questions at the end.
Or skills you already have, and how you might think about those as they relate to the federal government. So how many of you are interested maybe in a career in policy analysis or policy research? Great, I see lots of hands here. So that skill, policy analysis, you might be saying, what could that look like? That could be conducting background research on policy topics, drafting memos or policy briefs. And so as you consider wanting to do policy analysis, how you might apply those skills, you might look for roles that are titled legislative assistant or advocacy associate or policy associate. Those might be positions to look for as you're engaging in your career search. How many of you are interested in maybe pursuing a career using marketing or social media skills? Okay, not as many, but I will talk about this because there are many different ways to use your communication skills in government. So maybe you're interested in using communication skills, maybe not with a social media focus, but for writing policy briefs or news stories. So you can apply this skill by drafting social media posts for timely news and events, creating marketing materials that can be flyers or graphics for an organization, program, or events. So maybe you have those types of skills now, and as you think about those skills, how might you package those, or how might that qualify you for a potential role? It could be for a communications or marketing assistant, or for a social media manager type role. So as you think about your skills, think about that area that you're interested in. Maybe you want to be a researcher. Think about what skills you use on a daily basis in your research. And then from there, you can take those skills and think about maybe roles that would relate to positions you're interested in. So it's always important that as you think about your career, you might know what path, but also think about the skills you're developing or the skills you hope to build, and that will help you find the right fit for you. Here's some more. So as Stephanie mentioned, there are a lot of program management positions across government. And so you might see this represented, or you might apply this skill through creating and managing timelines for deliverables or initiatives, organizing team meetings, and track milestones. So if you're passionate about being organized, if you like spreadsheets, if you like developing plans and making sure your team executes, project management could be a great path for you. You might consider roles titled project coordinator or program manager. These are great paths and span a number of different focus areas, agencies, and careers. I'll also say, how many of you are interested in maybe pursuing a career in public speaking? Great, so I do see some hands here. So You might apply that skill on campus already or in prior internships by presenting findings to internal and external stakeholders. I know a lot of you are interested in research and often have to present your research, so you might be well fit for a career doing public speaking. If you want to facilitate workshops, lead trainings, or community meetings, maybe you do a lot of volunteer service in your community and you regularly bring together volunteers, you can use those public speaking skills you've built to search for roles in as a community engagement associate or a public relations specialist. There are lots of different positions. I'll touch on research, since so many of you indicated that was an area of interest, and so even with research, that could be completing literature reviews, synthesizing data, presenting findings through papers or reports, and those positions might commonly be listed as a research assistant or a policy analyst or policy fellow. The types of positions that have been listed here are not all the positions that exist. This is just to give you an idea. So as you think about your skills, think about the path you want to go, what skills you use that you either already have or you would like to build, and that'll help you find those relevant position titles that are a good fit for you. I'll pause here and we'll turn it over to questions. Your questions can be for me, Stephanie, or Jessie. We're here for you and want to provide any helpful insights we can as you prepare for your career search.
And we can go back to a slide if you want to see it again.
Going the wrong way. All right, good start. All right, so in our next section, we're going to talk a little bit more about USAID jobs. So you've heard about opportunities to explore in government, and we'll talk about how you can make that first step in. Before we jump into this section, how many of you are familiar with the platform USAID Jobs? Great, and how many of you already have a profile or have searched for jobs on the platform? Great, so a fair number of you, that's really awesome. So in this next section, we're going to walk through some stuff. This information might be familiar to you, but we'll talk a little bit about how to apply, how to read those job announcements, and just some tips and tricks to navigate along the way. But first, here's a quick heat map of federal employees by state. I'm sharing this to highlight that no matter where you live across the United States, there are opportunities in the federal government. So you don't just have to be here in Washington, D.C. to build a meaningful career in federal public service. There are jobs all across the United States, and you can see in California, there's a significant number of roles, in Texas, as well as other areas throughout the East Coast, but opportunities really are everywhere. So whether you're interested in the sciences, you want to do something in policy or beyond, there are jobs all across the country. Here on this page, I'll talk a little bit more about the USA Jobs internship portal. This is a specific portal set up on USA Jobs to be able to search for internships. Prior to this portal, you would often have to go and sift through maybe hundreds to thousands of job announcements to find internships. This portal makes it easy. While it's not every internship that exists in the federal government, it's a great place to start. So Stephanie talked about the Federal Internship Finder. That's one tool you can use, and you can also use the internship portal to find internship positions. And just like I said, these positions are all across the country at a number of agencies, so take the time to explore your interests and see what might make sense for you. There's a lot of really great work you can consider. And then the recent graduate portal, similar to the internship portal, this page allows you to search for recent graduate opportunities. So maybe you're building experience now in internships in other sectors, and you decide that when you graduate, you want to consider a role in the federal government. Or maybe you're planning on graduate school and your next stop is the federal government after. The recent graduate portal can be a great first step in searching for opportunities. Just like the internship portal, it highlights roles for recent grads. The federal government defines recent grads as anyone who's been within 2 years of graduating from either an undergraduate, graduate, or another advanced degree program. So as you're planning your career, you can survey other sectors, you can explore other organizations, and maybe you want to go back to graduate school later and then pursue government. Just know that this is another resource for you as you're considering all the possibilities in your career. And then here I'll talk about filters. So USA Jobs has these helpful portals that make it easier to search for positions, but the main website for USA Jobs is big, it's vast, there are thousands of opportunities, it can often feel daunting or make you feel like you're wasting your time. However, these filters make things a lot easier. So when you're on the site, you'll see filters on the far side of the screen here, you'll see ones for students and recent graduates. There's also filters for a number of other different identities that might apply to you. Use those to your advantage. By using those, you can find opportunities tailored to your interests, whether that's a certain area, a certain career level, a certain type of agency you want to work for, or even a mission area. You can use these filters filters to help you along the way. So I've talked about using filters, I've talked about the portal. All these tips and tricks are to help make it easier for you to find and apply for jobs. The process can take a lot of time, and so we'll continue on with some more tips and tricks. But instead of using filters on the right side of the screen, we're going to talk about job series codes. So many of you have probably an interest in service, and you're like, I know I want to use my communication skills, or I want to do a job in policy, or I'm interested in research. Using the job series codes that are found in our career guides that Stephanie highlighted can be a great shortcut in finding positions. So instead of scrolling and looking for things that make sense for your career, you can use the job series codes as a shortcut. So one thing I recommend is maybe you want to pursue a career in program management, and that job series code is 0340. You can use that to narrow down your search to only program management jobs. Now, maybe you're interested in pursuing a career, let's say a large agency like the Department of Treasury, with all types of subcomponents and thousands of employees. If you just type in Department of Treasury, you might get hundreds of positions that are open. So you can type in your agency, and you can add that job series code to give you more specific results. This will save you time, and instead of spending hours searching for roles that align with your interests, it'll narrow it down to minutes. And this is really helpful because I'm sure as you all are thinking about your careers, whether that be internship or full-time jobs, it's a time-consuming process. It's a pathway to a rewarding career, and these shortcuts are a great way to get there faster. Oh, I'm keeping the wrong button. So in this next section, we'll talk a little bit more about reading a job announcement. Some of you talked about having visited the USAID Jobs website. How many of you have read a job announcement? Have any of you gone through? Okay, I see a couple hands. You might, in your experience, you might have seen that it can be tricky to read a job announcement. There's a lot of information. And oftentimes I've read job announcements and asked after the fact, what have I read? What does this job even do? And so we'll break it down a little bit for you to help you as you go back to USA Jobs and begin planning your career. Job announcements are structured where there's a title at the top, often includes agency, the sub-agency or subcomponent, and then a position summary and who the job is open to. It's important to pay attention to these things because you want to make sure you're looking at opportunities that align with your goals and your interests. So always identify that title. That title will give you an idea of who the position is for. Often for internships or recent graduate positions, they may use the title student trainee. That's the federal government's way of saying entry-level role or internship. So if you see something that says student trainee, summer trainee, early career, or anything with the word trainee, know that that can be a great first job. In other sectors, you might see things like entry-level. The word entry-level trainee is kind of the federal government's way of saying that. Reading the job summary is very helpful. It gives you an idea of what the position might look like, and it varies agency to agency. So carefully read that because it'll help you understand whether that job's a right fit for you. Another thing I'll highlight is that as you search for positions is to just save those positions to your profile. By creating a USA Jobs profile, you can save those roles, compare them to other ones, and determine what the best choice is for you. I recommend creating a profile if you haven't done so already. So you can visit the site, but when you create a profile, that gives you advanced features that allow you to save jobs, to save your searches, and so when you go back, you don't have to redo everything every single time you visit the site. It makes it nice because you can start your search today, but finish an application tomorrow. The last thing I'll highlight here is in the job description, you'll also see salary ranges, as well as pay scale, and what those classifications are. The federal government uses something what's called the GS scale. You can look more, find more information on USA Jobs, but anywhere from GS4 to GS9 is most typical for that internship to early career range. If you've completed a graduate degree, you might consider looking from GS9 to GS12 or even 13 at times. But those are some of the things to look for. So those keywords are student trainee, analyst, policy specialist. Those can be some of those words to look for, as well as the GS scale ranging from GS4 to GS11. After you've read the job summary, I'll just quickly touch on this. The job duties go into more information about the job itself. It covers the the day-to-day, what you might expect, or typical responsibilities. This is a really important section to read, especially when you go and build your resume. you'll want to try and build your resume in alignment with some of the job descriptions. And then also additional sections you can review are the requirements, the qualifications, the education needed for a role, how you'll be evaluated, and then how to apply. And then in this last section, I'll just cover a little bit on federal resumes. We won't go too deep because I know throughout the conference you all will engage in some other programming on this, but this is a critical piece to navigating USA jobs, is having that federal resume. So just a couple details for you. As of September 2025, the federal resumes have been shortened to only be 2 pages in length. This is great. It will take you less time to complete your federal resume, but much of the guidance still applies. You still want to use plenty of detail and add as much as you can, but instead of creating something that could be 5 or all the way to 20 pages, it's only 2 pages. We recommend using the USA Jobs Resume Builder. It formats your resume for you, and then it's already on your profile, and you can attach it to any job you want to apply to. That makes it way easier and will save you a ton of time. If you wish, you can build it on your own, but then you have to worry about formatting and all these other pieces, and highly recommend using the Resume Builder. Anytime you can save time in the job search, it's going to be really helpful for you. And then last but not least, some top tips from the partnership. Always tailor your federal resume to the job announcement. I'm sure you've heard that before for other internships or opportunities. Customize that resume where you can. Find opportunities to add numbers, even if it's not from internships, but other leadership experiences, or include the conference you're attending this week. Talk about what you've learned, or if there's skills that you gained, quantify that if possible. Market your skills and achievements, and then use common language. So oftentimes, folks reading the job description, they're reviewing hundreds of resumes. They don't know you personally, so use common language that anyone can understand. That way, you've got the best chance of securing an interview. Because not everyone knows every acronym or every experience that you've done personally, so try to make it easy for anyone to understand. Here's a little bit of information on the federal hiring timeline. So typically, it's about 100 days from application release to start date, so that takes some time. I recommend being patient and having an attitude of patience when applying to federal jobs. It's a rewarding career path, but it takes some time to get there. So you'll apply, then your application enters a review stage. If selected for an interview, you'll move through the interview process, and someone will update you along each step. If you're selected for the position, you'll receive a tentative job offer, then go through a background check and security clearance process. That background check and security clearance process varies depending upon the role. So if you're doing something related to national security or intelligence, that background check and security process might be longer versus somebody who might be in a program management role. It really varies by agency and career. And then last but not least, you'll have your start date. So it's a long process, but getting to that start date can be a rewarding start to a long career in public service. And then here, I'll talk through just social media use in the federal government. So I just wanted to highlight this as social media is a popular tool for promoting your brand, being able to market who you are. It can also be a great way for employers to learn more about you, but there's just some tips and tricks to keep in mind as you use social media. So for federal jobs and internship candidates, social media profiles may be reviewed during the background check process. There's no consistent policy across the federal government, but we encourage you all to use good judgment. And so, outside of your career, you might use social media for a number of things, whether that's for your personal life, a passion project, or even something related to a potential federal career. Use good judgment there, and typically for federal employees, personal social media accounts are permitted as long as content remains personal. And sometimes you might see that. So as you've been doing research, maybe searching for folks on LinkedIn, you might see sometimes they put user my own or something. And sometimes that could be their agency or team requires that. But in other ways, just continue to be thoughtful about those things, because it can be a great tool to help promote your skills and experience. Or it could be something that could cause an employer not to want to hire you. So use good judgment and be thoughtful of that as you're building your professional brand and thinking about what career path you'd like to choose. The last thing I'll highlight is typically in the federal government, if you accept a full-time job as a civil servant, per the Hatch Act, federal employees cannot use their personal social media accounts for official government purposes or engage in partisan political activity while on duty. So meaning they can't be using their personal social media for related to partisan political activity while they're in their job. And they can do whatever they please in their personal life. Or volunteer for the campaign of a candidate or for partisan political office. And that's because the civil service is nonpartisan, promoting good government for everyone. And so that's just a little bit why the takeaway here is, as you think about social media, whether that's the platforms you use, a podcast you have, blogs you write, just think about what you're posting, why you're posting it, and what effect it might have. Using that round of judgment can be really great as you plan for your career. And now I'll turn it over to Stephanie to talk through career pathways and pivots.
So one thing I did not mention when I was talking about the history of the partnership. So historically, we've always worked with the federal government. We're the federal government's best friend. But as of last year, we actually started working with a number of state and local governments and started to learn a little bit more about them. So even though the focus of our presentation and our panel is going to be on federal service, we just wanted to touch briefly on some career pathways and pivots, just in case federal service is not necessarily on the horizon for you immediately after graduation, in case federal hiring is a little bit tough, or you're just looking for another way to get that same experience, and when an opening in federal government does open up, you'll be ready with the right experience to enter. So there are a number of ways that you can do some pathways and pivots within the realm of public service overall. So of course, the first is federal government, very well-known public service pathway. State and local government as well is a possibility for you. You can get a lot of the same skills and experience in state and local government that is universally applicable into federal government. The private sector, I'm going to skip over this for a little bit, but there is a way for you to really think about, contracting for federal government. So you're not really going to be a federal employee, but you can still work with federal agencies, consulting, lobbying. If you are interested in policy and advocating for that policy, that might be a really good route for you. Nonprofits and NGOs, that is what the partnership does. So again, we are tangentially related to public service. I don't necessarily consider myself a public servant, but I am in the realm of public service and getting that information and experience. And then higher ed. So a lot of public universities are funded by the government. And you can also be considered a state government employee if you work for a university. So just something to keep in mind. So starting with state and local government, if you're interested, governmentjobs.com is a really great starting point. A lot of state, local, county, city governments post their jobs and internships on this website, and they actually host their entire hiring site on this website. So this is a great place to start in case you're interested. Another way to do it is just to go straight to the state website and see where it directs you to. And then just some other places where you can search and some sample roles that you could look into if you're eventually interested in getting into federal service. So these are all of the websites. So Government Jobs is probably the #1 place to go to, but you can also go to careeronestop.org, governmentresource.com, directly on the state, city, county's website. And then some sample roles. So grants compliance manager, there are plenty of grants management roles in federal government. So if you get your start in state and local and eventually transfer over to federal, that experience can be universally applicable. City manager, you'll get a lot of public administration experience through that type of role. So just think about ways that that experience can benefit you. Legislative assistant, so a lot of state and local governments need those legislative assistants. So while it's not federal service, if you're ever interested in living on the Hill in Congress in any capacity, that's a great option for you. And then enlisted promotions manager, so if you ever want to work for the VA, or if you want to work for the Department of Defense, Department of War, that is also an option for you. All right, academia, think tanks, and research. I think in the pre-survey, I saw a lot of you were interested in doing research as part of your future career. Can you just raise your hand if that was you? Awesome. All right, so think tanks, academia, and research are a great way to do this. So again, where to search, take a look at this list, write down any of those websites that may be of use to you. We also have 2 QR codes here to a full list of different think tanks if you might just be interested. A lot of think tanks are independent organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, American Enterprise Institute, but a lot of think tanks are also based at universities. So think about, again, if it's a public university, you can do your public service that way. And then just some options for you with sample roles. I'll give you all a second to write this down. I still see some pens, I'll give you all a couple more seconds. All right, moving forward. NGOs, just like the partnership, a great way to get that experience as well. So Logan and I, our primary focus is program management with some grants management, budget management thrown in there. Again, great experience that you could eventually throw into federal service. So these are some great places to search. Idealist is probably the #1 place to go if you're interested in nonprofit work and NGOs, if you're not already working on LinkedIn. But there are definitely ways that, again, you can get that experience. So research assistant, you can still do those research type of roles in NGOs and nonprofits. And any type of coordinator role, you're gonna learn a lot about what it takes to run a program, run a project. Understanding how policy might impact the way that your organization runs. I've learned a lot about that at the partnership, and again, can be easily translated into federal service. All right, Logan, I think I'm transferring this one over to you. So we are going to talk a little bit more about building those transferable skills outside of federal government with a view to go into federal service.